for us to explore what is a healthy diet, because there's so much information out there and so many different opinions about what comprises a healthy diet. So this evening, that's what we're going to be discussing with Joanna Rushton. Welcome, Jo. Are you there?
I am, thank you, and hello
Fantastic.
to everybody.
Fantastic. Yes, and good evening to everybody from all over Australia, which is fantastic to be with you. Joanna, perhaps we could start just by talking about the fundamental principles that underpin a healthy diet, because we can always start with principles before we tailor it to the individual.
Absolutely, Patria. I really do believe that there are some very fundamental principles that underpin a healthy diet. Um, and the very first one that is very true to my heart because it really has played a big role in my own personal journey for creating health. And that's really understanding the wheel of life.
Hmm.
And the wheel of life really honors the natural closed organic cycle, and it all starts in the quality of the earth and the quality of the soil.
Mm.
So I really think of nutrition as being the ability to understand nutrition. For me, has come back to understanding soil and the nutrition and how soil becomes rich in its nutrient value.
And that's a huge issue, particularly in Australia, because we've lost so much of our topsoils because Australia is such an ancient continent. And so a lot of the nutrition that was in our topsoils, of course, has gone. And traditional farming methods often don't really focus on the health of the soil.
That's right, and it's it's a sad state of affairs. But I do believe that on a positive side of that is that in terms of how we can, I always call it, vote with our dollar, and that is really to support the local farmers that are honouring the traditional methods of
Mm,
organic farming,
mm,
and you know aren't ruining the topsoil, as you say, with the insecticides and the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides and all of these chemicals that end up as residue on our foods, as they end up residue in the plants. Um, and, you know, it's the accumulative effects that are
mm,
often hard to connect with because, we don't have an instant effect.
In fact, I was reading a study just the other day that one of the most common fungicides that's used worldwide, when it's been tested on mice, not on people, it produces obesity, anxiety, and depression.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is one of the most common fungicides that's been around for the last 50 years. And it really makes one wonder about the health of people right now, and why there are so many health issues.
Mm. A- Absolutely. And on the other scale of the wheel of life, we have unfortunately what it will create when we don't honor that Mother Earth's ecosystem of having a natural closed organic cycle. We end up moving into methods of farming that open us really into a wheel of degeneration, and ultimately, in most cases, for some people, a wheel of death.
Mm.
Because of the accumulation of these toxins and also the farming methods and how animals are kept and treated and often fed what they shouldn't be fed, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about later on. Grain-fed meat, as an example.
You even see it on menus now, promoting it as if it was something that you would want.
I know, and it is so
Yeah.
misleading, as is so much of the marketing out there today is incredibly misleading, which is why I really hope that tonight's webinar is going to give our listeners the insight and um, the discernment that they need to have when they're making their choices.
So you're saying first up that organic is preferable because of that closed cycle that you're talking about that looks after the soil, the animal, the plant, and ends up with a healthy product at the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is certainly up there in one of the most fundamental principles of if you're hoping to create a healthy diet for yourself, you really need to look at what creates the health of an animal, and that is dependent on what the animal feeds off, and therefore what creates the health of the plant that the animal feeds off. We need to look at what creates the health of the plant, and that stems back to the soil.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is an absolute key.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite reads is about Rudolf Steiner, and he was an amazing well, philosopher, architect, agriculturalist, and I've read a number of his books, and he was prolific in his writings of the importance of the microorganisms in soil and
Mm,
soil health.
yes.
You know,
And how do you ensure that, other than buying organic and hoping that the organic farmer is very focused on the soil? I suppose the other way of making sure that you're getting really good food and fresh food is to grow it yourself.
that I guess that most definitely would be the ultimate. I myself and my partner, we have a little veggie patch in the back of our garden, and it's a work in progress, and it does
Yeah.
take time and effort. But I do believe that we put our time and effort into the things that we value most. And for
Mm,
myself, my health is in the first three of my priorities in my life, and therefore my energy and my choices really do go to what I value.
mm,
And that's another important thing when we come to creating health, and um, if we want to change the experience that we're having, we need to be willing to change choices in our life to move towards that new experience.
yes. And when we talk about food that's alive because it's come from soil that's alive, what does that actually mean as far as our physical health is concerned?
That's a great question, Patria. I often look at the soil of Mother Earth as her digestive system. And similar to our digestive system that requires a very fine balance between the good and the bad bacteria in our gut, that's
Hmm.
exactly what the soil requires as well. And
Mm,
for us to get the optimal levels of nutrition from food, we also require what we call digestive enzymes. Now, the
hmm.
body doesn't make many of its own digestive enzymes, so we actually rely on foods rich in digestive enzymes, rich in their own enzymes. And
Right.
one of the ways that we can ensure that we're getting that is if foods are organically grown, because research has shown that they are nutriently more dense in
Mm,
vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, and digestive enzymes.
mm, mm. And
So,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was also going to mention, I know we'll be talking a little bit about raw and cooked food later on,
Hmm.
but often when the digestive system is ready to um, take in raw food, then raw food can be another wonderful way of ensuring that we are getting plentiful um, levels of good quality enzymes in our
Mm,
food.
mm,
Often through cooking methods, we can destroy the digestive enzymes and the vital trace nutrients of the minerals and trace minerals in food just by often cooking our food at high temperatures.
and I suppose pasteurization and irradiation of food is another issue that would eliminate some of the enzymes and interfere with some of the vitamins.
Absolutely, it does. And, it's a very it's a hot topic often that I have with my clients, and that's the topic of raw milk. And you know, I have a number of clients that are very open to exploring the material that I give them and learning what might be the dangers of pasteurization and moving away from pasteurized foods or irradiated foods
Mm.
and moving more across to raw dairy. And you know, for a lot of people, especially parents with children, it is a subject that they're often very concerned about, and you
Mm.
know, naturally so when there is so much, I believe, misunderstood information shared out there
Yes.
around, you know, raw milk. You know, we only need to go back to the days before Louis Pasteur introduced pasteurization, and it was, you know, it was absolutely natural. And from the research that I've read, pasteurization was actually introduced um, because after the First World War, the amount of and the introduction of chemicals with farming started to increase the levels of bacteria and the
Ah,
levels of bacteria that the cattle were starting to
yeah.
produce.
Yeah.
And so they were actually having to do it, obviously for the health reasons, but we often overlook what created the downslide in the introduction of more bacteria in the first place.
Exactly. And Joanna, the whole issue of drinking milk at all, because human beings are the only animal on the planet that continues drinking milk after we're weaned, do you feel it's a good food for people? Raw milk?
I believe that it does have its place, and I work with nutrition on a very individual level with people. I
Mm.
really honor that we are all individuals and we all have our very own unique biochemistry, and we're not all genetically programmed to do well on certain foods. I follow a method of nutrition that really honors the biochemistry of an individual, and
Mm.
which means that the biochemistry of an individual is influenced by their ethnic, geographic, and racial background.
Yes. Yeah.
And and so I feel that milk, raw milk itself, does have a role to play, and most certainly in the younger.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need it in our diet to be healthy? I don't believe we do.
I hope not, because I haven't had it for about 40 years.
So, you know, is it an essential nutrient? No, it's not.
Mm.
All that we claim to get from milk, the calcium and the various vitamins and minerals, can be sought after from many other natural, you know, an array of vegetables.
Yeah, well, sesame seeds and dark leafy greens have got far more digestible calcium in them than cow's milk
Absolutely,
does. Mm.
absolutely. And
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 what about fats though, Joanna? Because there's so much confusion too about what constitutes a healthy fat and a non-healthy fat, and some people are all for butter and others for oil. And what's your ideas around the kinds of fats that we ought to be including in our diets?
well, one of the things that I wanted to place preference on first, if I may, and that is the importance of our digestive system. And for us to, you know, before we start looking at good fats, bad fats, or any other form of nutrition, one of the most important things that I've learned over the years, and which has been absolutely prevalent in my own journey of health and those of my clients that I've helped, is that creating a healthy gut, first and foremost,
Mm-hmm.
um, is absolutely crucial. And what I found is if if one's digestive system is out of balance with its good and bad bacteria, or is overloaded through a fungal growth or parasites, and its function is not optimal, then all the good nutrition in the world
Mm.
isn't going to do much for us. Because
Mm.
unless our digestive system is actually able to break down, digest, and assimilate and eliminate, then no matter how good the food is, if we're not actually able to get the nutrients from the quality food that we're investing our time and money into, then it's almost invested time and money down the toilet.
Mm. Yeah. And this is
So
particularly so for people, I imagine, who might be undergoing any treatment or recovering from using antibiotics, or there are so many medications now that interfere with gut bacteria, and of course, stress interferes with gut bacteria as well. So, how do you get that balance right in the gut?
well, a wonderful question, a big question. The first thing would be to detox, and the easiest and most gentlest way is to start by cleaning up your diet.
Mm,
And you know, detoxification is a subject really unto its own. But to
yes.
begin with, it's really taking out the processed foods in your diet
Mm-hmm.
and really making sure that your fundamental choices of macronutrients, i.e. your fats, protein, and carbs, are really coming from natural whole foods.
Yeah.
So your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, um, and even with your whole grains, I'm a great advocate of gluten-free. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that grains of today have become highly processed
Mm,
from how they were, you know, 100 years ago, and how we actually prepare them and cook them really isn't honoring the the product itself. So to bring balance back into our gut, it's first and foremostly, let's take the things that create what we call dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the good and bad bacteria. And that would
yes.
be things like sugar,
Yeah.
alcohol,
Yeah.
um, hydrogenated fats,
Yeah.
everything that we know to be of a processed nature.
Yes.
And you know, becoming aware of where those things are hidden as well.
Mm,
Often the hydrogenated oils are hidden in what are advertised as healthy crackers that people
yes.
often rely on as snacks during the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
cutting
that's
those
really
things
about
out.
reading labels and becoming really familiar with what those numbers mean on the sides of packets. And um, I don't know about you, Joanna, but I actually don't buy any of those sorts of foods really that are pre-packaged and processed, and very, very little. And certainly you do need to read the labels on anything that you're buying in that way because of the sugar and salt, and let alone all of the preservatives, colorings, flavorings, emulsifiers, and so on that are in them.
Absolutely, Patria. I mean, I always recommend, you know, best practice is always to shop on the outskirts of a supermarket and never travel down the inner aisles. And
Okay,
if you
tell us
if
about that.
well if you walk around the outskirts of a you know a Woolies or a Coles, then what do you tend to find? You tend to find your fruits and your vegetables and your fresh meats, and they're all on the outer rim of a
Okay.
supermarket. And
Mm-hmm.
then as you start to move more to the inner aisles of a supermarket, you get into your packaged sections and your canned sections and your boxed
Okay.
sections, and everything becomes more and more processed the more you enter into into the
I
lion's
do.
den, so to speak.
Oh, I'm going to keep my eye open for that. That's very interesting. We often recommend to people that they shop in places that either have, if they can't afford organic, or sometimes organic food too can look pretty pathetic and unhappy. If you can't get organic, we usually recommend that people go to a place that has a high turnover, and not picking from the bottom of the shelf, because we know that in lots of supermarkets, for instance, they spray underneath all of the fruit and veg because no one wants to see cockroaches or other creatures around. So it's really hard sometimes to be able to shop in a healthy way. So we recommend go to those big markets where there's a high turnover and pick the food that really looks the freshest and is at the top of the pile.
Absolutely. You're so right. It is a challenge out there to find quality and fresh produce. And it is a case of I work with my clients to create a step-by-step process, and you know it can become overwhelming if you feel you're very much sort of the person who has and knows nothing different other than going to the local supermarket. It can become overwhelming when somebody suggests, you really need to source your meat from this place and your vegetables from this place, and
Mm,
they feel like all of a sudden they can be going to 3 or 4 different places.
mm,
And as we know, that can add time and energy and money to the exercise. So I even promote to my clients to find a really good online organic vegetable and meat supplier, and
okay.
take all of that effort out of the equation.
Mm, mm.
And that's another
Well,
great way.
yeah, exactly. We've certainly recently secured exactly that, buying directly from the farm, and it does make a huge difference. It's just nice to know where your food has actually come from.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many different opportunities these days of getting together with a group of friends or another family and actually, sharing the purchase of a whole
Mm,
cow or a whole lamb and dividing
right.
that.
Yeah. Um, and I'm just thinking as we're going through some of these points, Joanna, that some of our listeners may want to ask a specific question of you while we have you in this webinar, because I know too we're going to have you at Quest soon, doing a whole day on some of these areas. But I'm aware that some of our people from Kalgoorlie or Rockhampton or whatever may have questions that they'd like to ask. So they'll notice down in the bottom right hand corner there's a space where you can type in a question, and we'll do our best to incorporate those questions so that you can get them answered by Joanna this evening. So Joanna, was there more that you wanted to say about gut health before we moved on to looking at fats and what are the healthy fats and the not so healthy?
No, I think we've covered that. Just to give a general awareness, I think is very important about the gut. But
Mm-hmm.
moving on to your previous question around fats, I love this topic. It never ceases to
You're a
create a
simple
lot of contention, and it's always a topic around the dinner table at home, and
one.
it's I've had to learn the hard way. I was somebody who followed uh, the low fat, the no fat, all sorts of um, you know m- protocols that were validated by your health authorities and um, experts in the field,
Mm,
and I became sicker and sicker. And it wasn't until I finally sourced out an amazing naturopath for myself some 8 years ago, and I had my eyes opened to a whole new way of understanding fats and the role of fats in the body and how essential fats are, and
mm,
understanding truly what is a quality fat and what is um, a bad fat,
mm, mm.
the fats that we really want to stay away from. So, if I was to share with you the quality fats, and this is where a lot of people's chins will often hit the floor when I say saturated fats are in actual
Yes,
fact a quality fat. Um,
yes.
Most people will look at you astonished.
Mm,
Um,
mm. So the slide that we have up at present with the nuts and olive oil and butter and obviously the omega-3s in the fish and the red meat and dairy products, those are the healthy fats that you recommend people include in their diet. And of course, it's really important that people know their own bodies, because for one person, one thing will work, and for another, as you say, there are so many diets now that eliminate fats when really they've got some absolutely essential nutrients for us.
Absolutely, Patria. The way I think this is, perhaps important for us to understand, the way I describe the three types of fats that we have, which are our polyunsaturated fats and our monosaturated fats and our saturated fats. The polyunsaturated fats, often known as the vegetable oils, such as your cottonseed oil and your canola oil and your soybean oil, they're our highly processed, highly um, fragile oils that um, are, well, they turn rancid under heat,
Mm,
first of all,
mm,
um, and they become a toxin to the body.
yes.
These sort of oils, which, as I say, are the polyunsaturated oils, if we look at, imagine, this is the analogy I give my clients, imagine the polyunsaturated oil mimicking that of silk, which is, a very delicate material. It's easy to tear and it's easy to set a light to.
Mm,
And then if we looked at monosaturated oils, which are more of your olive oils, your avocados, and your nuts and your seeds, that's a bit more like the material of cotton. So it's a little bit stronger, harder to tear, and again, harder to set light to. And then if we took a look at the saturated fats, which are, from animals and also from palm oil, which is a saturated fat, and coconut oil as well, which is a marvelous, marvelous saturated fat.
yes.
That's, I often use the analogy of hemp as the material. It's very, very strong, really, really hard to tear, very,
Yeah.
very hard to set a light to. And when you look at the role of fat in your body and how it plays an absolutely essential role for the integrity of the cell membrane of every one of our cells, then we want a strong cell membrane so that when we have to protect ourselves from the free radicals and the toxins that come in and try to invade our cells, the stronger the cell membrane is, the harder it is for that toxin to pierce through and damage the cell. So when we look at the material that we want our cell membranes to be made up of, I always ask the question, so do we want our cells membranes to be made up of hemp or silk or cotton?
Yes. That's a good way of looking at it. And you're saying that the healthy oils and fats are really the things that help the cell wall also to be strong.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very responsible for the integrity of the cell membrane.
Hmm.
And as we know, um, absolutely essential for healthy brain function, absolutely essential
Mm,
for a strong immune system, and
mm,
absolutely essential for a balanced hormonal system.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that, if there's anybody out there who is struggling to reach their optimal weight, then really understanding the role that quality fat and quality protein plays in balancing the hormones of the body so that one can lose weight.
Mm,
Fat really does, play a big role in that.
mm. And is there an ideal ratio um, for the omega 3s and 6s that we should try and stay close to?
Yes, Patria, there is. Ideally, in an ideal world, a ratio of 1 to 3 would be ideal.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we can stay within a safe range of 1 to 4, but
Yes.
really when we start to move into a ratio where the omega-6 goes above a ratio of 4 to the 1 omega-3, then we start inviting trouble. And research shows that the majority of people are on a ratio of 1 to 17. And
Wow.
I've read reports that are even higher than that
No,
in
that must
America.
be such an acidic state in the body as well.
Absolutely, absolutely it is. So there is an ideal ratio, and this is probably just a good segue to mention to our audience ways in which the omega-6 can be increased in the diet without us really realizing. And this is, as we mentioned before, through the grain-fed meat,
Yes.
because the grains become an omega-3 fatty acid
Okay.
in the meat. And that, contributes to the massive problem we have with inflammation.
Yeah, which is huge in so many, as an underlying cause in so many diseases.
Absolutely. The moment the acid and alkaline balance in the body is affected, then we know that disease starts in an acidic environment, and that inflammation is the precursor to the manifestation of all diseases.
Yes. Yeah.
So it becomes a very important symptom to learn how to manage, and because my love is the prevention,
Mm,
I really work in the preventative arena of
mm,
health,
mm,
and that really is about creating the right lifestyle choices.
mm,
And one of the ways that we can reduce inflammation for ourselves is really by, again, taking out those processed foods that create
mm,
an acidic environment in the body and promote pro-inflammatory hormones.
mm. And so that's what you're saying are in the anti-inflammatory foods?
Well, so we have foods that tend to promote a pro-inflammatory reaction, and we have foods that promote an anti-inflammatory reaction.
Mm,
So the obvious foods that are going to create a pro-inflammatory response will be things that are high in sugar,
mm,
our processed foods that we talked about earlier. Um, when our omega-3 and our omega-6 balance is out of balance, and we're taking in too many omega-6, then that starts to create the body to secrete what we call pro-inflammatory hormone mimicking substances called prostaglandins.
yes.
And when this happens, and I think that we often forget that people that put up with food intolerances and food allergies, they are also the conditions that create a lot of inflammation. If somebody's digestive system is constantly creating an inflammatory response due to a food that they are intolerant to or have an allergy from, then
Yes.
this inflammatory response, when it isn't managed and when it isn't addressed, starts to
Mm,
create the environment for other disease and other problems to manifest themselves.
mm, mm. And how would you know if there was a food that you might eat quite commonly that you're actually allergic to or have a sensitivity to? How do you know that other than by going on some kind of detoxing diet where you leave foods out and gradually introduce them? Is that the way to find out which foods you could be having a reaction to?
That is definitely one of the ways, a rotation diet.
Hmm.
Clients that start with me that are open to coming off gluten straight away I
Yeah.
tend to recommend that as just absolutely mandatory to come off gluten. And it is amazing how many people say how much better they feel. And their symptoms that are alleviated can be anything from bloatedness that they didn't realize they had because they had become so accustomed to that
Yeah.
environment for
Yeah.
themselves that they didn't actually know they were bloated until they had an
Mm.
experience of not being bloated.
Yeah.
um, from people presenting with a clear headiness, whereas before they didn't realize just how foggy and how tired gluten was affecting their energy levels and their mental clarity.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
until they do have an experience of coming off. So, a rotational diet is a very good first way of um, finding out. You can also obviously go for allergy tests
Mm.
and for food intolerant tests as well.
Mm,
Um,
they're not always terribly successful, those, though I know that lots of people who've had fairly subtle food intolerances that are really having a huge impact on their life don't show up. The same as people often don't show up as having a sensitivity to gluten when they have a blood test. However, if you take them off gluten, they immediately feel much better. So
that
I think
absolutely.
some of the testing isn't as acute, I think, as it could be.
That is
And and I think too, one of the things that often happens now is that we used to eat foods for a short period of time while they're in season, but now many of the foods are kept in cold storage or irradiated, and we're actually eating some of these foods that do antagonize in a healthy way the immune system, but we're eating them far too long, and so therefore the immune system gets antagonized for too long a time, and that's also a problem. So we really need to be eating foods that are just in season now.
absolutely. And I'll say to our beautiful audience, what is the easiest way of doing that? Well, if you eat organically, you can't but eat what is in season.
Yes, and it's
Um,
always the cheapest too, of course, what's in season.
Absolutely, absolutely it is. And I also think that when it comes to um, addressing the food intolerances and the food allergies, um, we often create, as you mentioned before, an intolerance by not just eating, foods that are always available to us, but the continuous repetition of the same breakfast every single day. I have
Yes,
many clients that, when they fill in their food diary, often breakfast, lunch, dinner can
yeah.
be the same, and there's no variety. And we're
It's so
actually,
easy so easy to fall into those patterns of just buying the staple vegetables that you know the whole family will enjoy, and we forget to eat all of the idiosyncratic and unusual ones that are there just for a brief period of time because they're in season.
That's right, that's right. And the other beautiful thing that Mother Nature has always known far better than us is, what our immune systems need at the various times of the season, and the type of vegetables and the different methods of cooking that are available to us at the different times of the year really embrace and enhance the particular foods that our bodies do best on at that time of the
Mm.
year.
Yes, yes. And I was reading too that oftentimes the insecticides and fungicides and herbicides that they use on the food, that tells the plant that it doesn't need to produce the chemicals within the plant to repel the pests naturally. And indeed, that's where the flavor and the nutrition is actually in the substances that the plant produces to get rid of the pests. So we not only lose flavor and nutrition when we use herbicides and fungicides and so on, we greatly, greatly diminish the flavor of the food.
We do, absolutely. When we destroy Mother Nature's natural policing system,
Mm,
um, And we do. We destroy the nutrients and the availability of that essential nutrients. So very
Mm,
true, Patria.
mm. And so many of these nutrients too work synergistically together, you know, that it's different from taking it in a vitamin pill than when you're eating it in a whole food and you're getting all of those trace elements and minerals and enzymes that you may not be aware of, and certainly don't get if you're just taking them as individual tablets.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, supplementation and, you know, the supplements, again, is almost a subject unto its own. Really understanding the linear approach that relying on supplements. And, you know, I often refer to um, supplements for people who aren't understanding the true role of vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, and all the reasons why they take supplements to
Mm,
ensure that they get the the vitamins they think that they're not getting enough of, or the minerals that they're not getting enough of. What they
mm,
forget is that one of the key roles of enzymes and vitamins and minerals in the diet is to unlock the availability of the nutrients in our food.
yes.
So the key thing here is, if the quality of your food isn't, you know, premier, isn't absolutely, um, you know, the precious quality it needs to be, then if you're on, you know, um, a suboptimal diet, then and you're supplementing with vitamins and minerals, all you're doing is helping your body to make available the lack of nutrients in the food that you're eating.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, the key thing, you know, for the, because there's very much this, you know, vitamins will save me mentality,
Mm,
and you know, my supplements will save me, you know, and so long as I'm taking my supplements, then, you know, I'll get away with it. And we forget the importance of the fundamental principles that I spoke about earlier, and that is, you know, the quality of the macronutrients we're taking in to begin with, the quality of the proteins, the quality of the fats, the quality of the carbohydrates. Because, you know, the key role of the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes is to make available the nutrients in those fats, proteins, and carbohydrates.
mm. And because tonight we're talking in part about slow cooking for fast people, because obviously people these days, everybody has so many commitments and responsibilities. Does slow cooking, you know, when you're cooking for hours at a time, if you prepare a meal, say at the beginning of the day and leave it to cook while you're at work, um, does that destroy a lot of the nutrition, or is a lot of the nutrition stay intact in that slow cooking?
One of the best things about slow cooking is because the temperature of slow cooking doesn't go above 110 degrees. It helps to maintain the essential nutrients in the food. So we are able to hold on to the value. The enzymes especially aren't destroyed the way they would be if you were to, you know, stir fry or grill or pan fry the
Mm,
meat or the vegetables, as an example. The slow cooking allows the meat to slowly cook, slowly become tender, and not lose the vital digestive enzymes in the meat that we need to help digest the meat.
right. And what about the veggies and pulses and legumes and things that you might use in slow cooking? The nutrition in those stays intact?
Absolutely, far more so. You know, the I would say that slow cooking is the next step to maintaining the value and nutrient level of food than raw food. You know, if you're not eating your food raw, then the best cooking method you could use for your meats and your pulses would be slow cooking. I mean, obviously,
Yes.
steaming your vegetables is a
Mm,
wonderful way you know, so long as we cook them to what we call al dente, where they're crisp and they're not steamed to a mush. Um,
Yes.
then obviously steaming is another wonderful way for our vegetables. But
Yes.
to slow roast, and you know, another wonderful component to slow cooking is that the type of meats that lend itself to slow cooking are the meats that are cheaper, so you know that's always good on the back pocket.
Yeah.
They are the meats, and the reason why they're cheaper are because they are the meats that are closer to the bone. They're often the
Mm.
joint meats,
Yeah, which is always where the flavour really is.
which is where the flavor is and which is actually where more of the nutrients is, because
That's
it
right.
holds more of the minerals and the bone marrow because the
Mm.
flesh is close to the bone.
Mm. Mm.
And most joints or most cuts that you'd use for the slow cooking, you would keep the bone in it. So,
Uh-huh.
you know, if we picture the cuts of osso buco as an example, which is the shin part of the leg of the calf,
Yes.
and we would slow cook with the shin left in it. And then in the middle part, you have that beautiful piece of bone marrow. And
Mm.
that is not just so high in so many nutrients that the body needs, but it is an absolute healing aid to the gut
Yes. Yeah, it's very
and the gut
soothing.
wall. Yes,
Mm.
very soothing, very
Mm.
soothing.
And you're going to be demonstrating some of these methods or how easy and simple it is with slow cooking in a few weeks at the centre, Joanna, which is going to be fantastic, so that people can, because there's just nothing like actually seeing a demonstration of it that really helps you to understand how easy it would be to incorporate these ideas at home.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for that day. Slow cooking for fast people is one of my most favorite cooking demonstrations to share with people. You know, for so many reasons. I I have so many clients that I've converted to slow cooking, and in their in their beautiful attempt at moving across to that method of cooking, they, you know, as we do, we all make mistakes as we learn, and they often say to me, you know, I can't understand it. It all just seems like a sloppy, wet mess. And and the first thing that I say to them is, did you go adding a lot of stock or a lot of liquid? And they were like, well, yes, because how else? What else was it going to cook in? And
Aha.
this is the first mistake that people make with slow cooking, is to think that, you know, especially with joints of meat, whether or not you're wanting to slow roast a whole chicken or a leg of lamb, or a lamb shank, people tend to think that they need to put stock or some sort of liquid in the base, and you
Mm.
don't. So these will be all the wonderful techniques and a full day of exploration over, you know, hundreds and hundreds of different things that you can do in a slow cooker. I rely on it every single day. I put a dish in at night, and that becomes my lunch for the following day. It
Okay.
becomes, it really is slow cooking for fast people. We're talking about people that are time poor, you know, that want, you know, also want to save money, because slow cooking, as I said, it lends itself to the cheaper cuts of meat.
Mm.
Joe and
And when
Patria.
you don't have that time to spend in the kitchen, then, you know, you are looking for a healthier way to nourish yourself that doesn't rely on you spending hours in preparation. So I'm
Mm.
really looking forward to
And
sharing with people.
I noticed too that Amelia has a question about al dente microwave cooking. Is there a problem with that? And just also a clarifying question, are we talking centigrade or Fahrenheit in the 110 degrees?
Okay, um, we are talking 110 degrees
Fahrenheit,
Fahrenheit.
yeah?
Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really glad that somebody's posed the question about microwaves.
Yes.
And I'm going to say it. I absolutely am against using microwaves as a
Uh-huh.
form of cooking.
Yes.
Um, they really, really do destroy, they kill all the nutrients in your food. And I
Yes.
know that they've been created as a very, you know, convenient um, a piece of equipment in the kitchen,
Yeah.
but the convenience of it does not outweigh the cost that it takes on our health. Um,
Yeah, look, I'm really with you too, Joanna. I know that it changes the cell wall, particularly in proteins. And some of our listeners might want to, if you just microwave some green beans and steam some green beans and then just leave them both on your bench for a few weeks and see what happens. And the microwaved ones all sort of collapse and grow fur and turn grey, and the others just kind of gradually dry out. So it literally changes the cell wall of food and destroys a lot of the nutrition. I'm aware too that we're just getting towards um, the end, and someone's asking whether there are any recipe books for slow cooking, or whether you've written one, Joanna, or is that next week?
Look, there are wonderful, some great books out there, which I'm certainly happy to share. I don't have the names of them in front of me, but I can certainly blog about them. And yes,
Mm,
I do have my own cooking book coming out, which
excellent.
is not too far away. And on the day that I spend down at Quest, the beauty of it is that it's a full day from 10 till 4, and we'll have an opportunity to explore so many questions and recipes as well, and an opportunity to taste just the delights of what slow cooking can create for us.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to that day myself. And Joanna, uh, someone's just asking too about pressure cookers, which cook at a much higher temperature than slow cookers. Do you have any thoughts about pressure cookers?
That's a good question, Patria. I have actually never used a pressure cooker for
Because
myself.
I
It's
know I grew up with one, my mother always using one, and it cooked much, much more quickly than traditional cooking. But the idea was that it sealed in the nutrition. Uh, but yes, it's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it either.
well, I
And
had
I'm just thinking too, just in view of the time,
yes.
someone was asking earlier about how do you find a good naturopath? And there is a website which is not specifically for naturopaths. Obviously, if you're looking for a naturopath, you want one that belongs to one of the associations so that you know that they have all of the relevant qualifications. But there's also a website which is aima.net.au, and AIMA stands for Australasian Integrative Medicine Association. And those are GPs, mostly GPs, who have a strong interest in nutrition or in an integrative or holistic approach. And you can put in your postcode and they'll tell you the nearest doctor who has that kind of holistic integrative approach. So that could be helpful for some people who live um, not in Sydney or in some of these more far-flung places that we have with us this evening.
Yeah, wonderful.
So, so Joanna, we're really looking forward to having you with us at Quest on that weekend, which is the 27th and 8th, I think it is, 28th and 29th.
Mm.
Um, so that'll be fantastic. And people, I believe, too, are able to come and stay at Quest the night before, the Friday or the Saturday night. And then there's a meditation and mindfulness for busy people program with me on the Sunday. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to have a real weekend at Quest where you both have the opportunity to look at nutrition and this really nutritional and slow and easy way of people preparing food when they're frantically busy themselves. And then we're going to have a look at how do we bring meditation and mindfulness into our daily practice when we're all so fully committed and busy. So I'm hoping that some of the people with us this evening will be able to join us for that. Thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing just, I know, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all of this information.
It is, and thank you so much for allowing me to share. And the best part is on that weekend, which I'll certainly be staying for the second day with the meditation for you. I'm looking forward to that. But it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone who's been on tonight who wants to learn in more depth what we've spoken tonight. I'll certainly be covering a lot of the topics in a lot more detail on that day. So thank you, Petrea.
Fantastic. And thank you, Joanna. And shall I hand over to you, Kate, just to wrap up?
Yes, thank you very much, Petrea and Joanna. There's been a flurry of questions at the end, and Joe, I hope you will write us a blog that